Peace Prize wasn't the only issue building pressure. The broader political environment around the tournament started compounding every week. In February 2026, a group of 19 members of the European Parliament sent an open letter directly to UEFA. In it, they cited concerns about policies and rhetoric from the Trump administration that, in their view, raised serious questions about respect for international law. They called for public criticism of FIFA. They asked that a discussion about possible consequences, including a boycott, be allowed to take place. And they made a point that carries real weight. Europe provides 16 of the 48 teams at the 2026 World Cup. European nations represent one of the largest, possibly the largest, market for the tournament, with expected revenues exceeding 30 billion euros. If European football moves, everything moves. The German Football Federation became a focal point. Oke Gottlieb, a vice president of the German FA, said publicly that it was time to seriously consider and discuss a boycott. He drew a direct parallel to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, when the German national team protested FIFA's ban on pro-LGBTQ armbands with their mouths-covered team photo. He asked, "Qatar was too political for everyone, and now we're completely apolitical?" His point was pointed. If European football felt strongly enough about Qatar's human rights record to stage visible protests, what principle says the 2026 situation doesn't deserve the same level of scrutiny? And then there's the Greenland dimension. Donald Trump's repeated public statements about the United States acquiring Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark, created a direct friction point with several European nations that had already qualified for the 2026 World Cup. Tariffs were threatened, diplomatic language escalated. German lawmaker Roderick Kiesewetter suggested that escalating tensions of this kind could genuinely make it difficult for European nations to justify participation. The tariff discussions were reportedly dominated a meeting of UEFA heads of national associations. Norway, the Netherlands, Germany, France, and England were all directly implicated in the economic pressures being applied. What nobody is talking about loudly enough is the quiet but significant fact that all of this was happening while FIFA was simultaneously deepening its ties with the U.S. administration. Infantino announced that FIFA had opened an office in Trump Tower in New York. A replica of the World Cup trophy had sat in the Oval Office since 2018, the year Infantino announced the U.S. co-hosting deal. The relationship between FIFA's leadership and Washington was not neutral, and European football associations watching all of this unfold were drawing their own conclusions. Then came Iran. Iran qualified for the 2026 World Cup from Asia, one of the stories of the qualifying campaign. They were drawn into Group G alongside Belgium, Egypt, and New Zealand, with all their matches scheduled on the U.S. West Coast, Los Angeles, Seattle. And then, in February 2026, Israel and the United States conducted strikes on Iran, igniting a conflict in the Middle East that changed the entire character of the tournament's buildup. Iran's Football Federation asked FIFA to relocate their group stage matches from the United States to Mexico, not to cancel the matches, not to withdraw from the tournament, simply to move them to another co-host country, one that would not put Iranian players and staff in the position of traveling to a nation actively in military conflict with their own. The Iranian sports minister said the message was clear. If the relocation request is accepted, Iran's participation will be certain. FIFA said no. The matches will be played as scheduled. No changes to venues. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed FIFA's position publicly at a press conference in Mexico City. Trump, for his part, had written on social media that Iran was welcome to come to the United States for their matches, but that he really didn't believe it was appropriate that they be there for their own life and safety. Iran's national team responded that no individual or country could exclude them from the World Cup. But the situation remained entirely unresolved, with Iran's government leaving its final participation decision dependent on security guarantees that had not materialized. Think about the image that creates. A qualified nation with players who have prepared for years for a chance to compete on the biggest stage in football, asking for nothing more than the ability to play in a country that isn't actively at war with their own. and being told by football's governing body that the schedule cannot change. This is the point where the sport's claim to political neutrality starts to collapse under its own weight, because FIFA's neutrality, in practice, is not neutral at all. Keeping the schedule unchanged is a decision. Refusing to relocate matches is a decision. Awarding a peace prize to a sitting president whose policies are directly affecting the tournament is a decision. Every choice FIFA makes in this environment has political consequences. The question is only which political consequences they're willing to accept, and on whose behalf. The French sports minister said there is currently no desire from the French government to a boycott, but added she cannot anticipate what could happen. That word, anticipate, says a lot. Nobody in European football governance is categorically ruling anything out anymore. Would a boycott actually happen? Almost certainly not. The economic reality alone makes it nearly impossible. FIFA distributes money from World Cup revenues back to national associations. Major European leagues, the Premier League, the Bundesliga, and La Liga, have identified the United States as one of their most important growth markets. Walking away from the tournament would mean forfeiting funds that associations depend on, damaging relationships that clubs spend years building, and handing influence to nations that would still compete. And there's a historical precedent that matters here. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar generated enormous controversy. Migrant worker deaths, human rights concerns, LGBTQ+ rights restrictions. Every single federation that qualified for that tournament sent their team. Not one boycott held. All 32 nations competed. The moral arguments, however powerful, didn't translate into institutional action. But 2026 is not 2022, and here's what makes this moment different. In Qatar, the political concerns were largely separate from the host nation's relationship with the participating teams. The issues were human rights and governance, serious but not directly implicating the diplomatic relationships between European governments and the host. In 2026, the concerns are embedded in live conflicts, active military operations, tariff disputes, and the policies of a host nation whose administration is in direct tension with several of the governments whose football associations are supposed to be coming together to celebrate the sport. The 2026 World Cup doesn't just have a political backdrop. The politics are inside the tournament now, in the group stage fixtures, in the visa applications, in the hotel cancellations, in the conversations between federation presidents at UEFA meetings, in the letter from 19 members of the European Parliament, and in the Iranian football team that may or may not fly to Los Angeles in June. And yet, the ball will almost certainly roll on June 11th in Mexico City. Germany will play Curacao. France will play their first group match. England will do the same. Because football, in the end, is extremely difficult to stop. The athletes have prepared. The fans who can attend have paid. The broadcast deals are signed. The structure of the tournament has its own gravity, and very little, short of extraordinary escalation, is going to override it. But what European football is saying, through its federation vice presidents and its MEPs and its national association presidents, is that this cannot just be absorbed silently, that there is a cost to hosting the world's most watched sporting event inside a political environment this complicated, that FIFA's leadership cannot simultaneously claim to stand for human rights, award peace prizes with obvious political motivation, refuse to accommodate a nation fearing for its players' safety, and then ask everyone to just focus on the football. The sport deserves better. The fans deserve better. And the players from every nation, including Iran, including the ones from 39 countries whose supporters cannot get a visa to watch them play, they absolutely deserve better. So here's a question I want to leave you with. At what point does the political environment around a tournament become too much for football to simply absorb? Has the 2026 World Cup already crossed that line? Or is the game still bigger than all of it? Drop your answer in the comments. This is exactly the kind of conversation football needs to be having right now. If this kind of in-depth coverage is what you're here for, hit subscribe and join us for every major story between now and the final whistle in July. This story is still developing, and as always, football never stays quiet for long. See you in the next one.